Hello everybody, welcome to Casey's Garage. Today we're going to be switching out the oil in the rear diff and checking to make sure that everything's okay inside of it. Now this truck has got 67,000 miles on it, I believe, so it's definitely due for a service. I don't know if the previous owner had done it before, but we're going to do it. So what we've got here is we've got the gasket for the axle because we got to pull the back plate off to do it. We've got the gear oil. We're using 75/90 in this truck, and we've got something to drink because it's going to take a minute. All right, let's get started. All right, now what we have here is a series of 13mm bolts. What we want to do now is go ahead and start loosening them slightly. We don't want to remove anything yet. Oh, that's definitely bad. Alright, now that we've got the diff cover off, we can see inside and see just what kind of condition this was in. Now, the teeth still look totally fine, so I don't think there's any catastrophic wear. If we go in here on the bottom, stick the finger down there and check, then it doesn't really feel like there's any... I don't really think there was any issue with any metal flakings inside of this. Now we're still going to have to pull a plug in the bottom to get the rest of it. We could have done that in the beginning. Actually, we may not even have to do that, but we are at least going to do everything we can to get every last bit of this out, which pretty much all of it should come out when we pull this gasket off. But we are still going to take a rag and wipe it down. In fact, if you look up here towards the top, you can see stuff that had fallen on the diff when we pulled the cover off. We want to make sure to get all that cleaned off too, and that way there's nothing that goes inside the diff that could possibly cause long-term damage when we put it back together. Alright, so in order to remove the rest of the gasket, we're going to be using a gasket scraper. Now, what I'll be using here is this one right here, which is a plastic gasket scraper. What that does is it helps to remove the gasket while avoiding scoring on the metal. Alright, so now that we finally got everything cleaned up, we're going to take some RTV and we're going to make a small gasket around here, which, as you can see where the rust is where there was no oil, which it's probably kind of hard to see, but there's grooves all along this, and that's about where the gasket's going to mate. So what we're going to want to do is put a thin yet broad line on this side, put the gasket down, and then put another line on the gasket that mates with the rear differential, and then we're going to bolt it to the rear differential. So we're going to go ahead and do that. All right. Now we don't want to use too terribly much, because if it comes out too thick, then what'll happen is we'll end up with gasket maker in the differential fluid, and that's not good. That'll cause a big old mess. One thing I'd like to point out while I'm doing this is that everything inside the differential is totally fine. So the next time I change it, which you should change your rear differential fluid every 25,000 miles, I'm probably just going to pull the drain plug next time to avoid all the headache. I don't really beat the crap out of my truck, so I don't think it's going to have too many issues. I'd never done it before on this particular truck, so I felt like it was a good idea to get a base on what the truck was doing, which is the only reason I didn't use the drain plug in the first place. All right, now that that bead is on there, we'll go ahead and take the gasket. Now in this particular case, it does not matter what direction the gasket goes in, so I'm going to be putting this side in the position with the lines facing the rear differential. But in this particular gasket's case, it doesn't matter. Now, you may want to check your gasket before you put it on to make sure that it is non-directional or directional. I'll press this on to make sure that there's not going to be any leaks. And as you can see, we did go a little thick in that area, which is a good thing that we figured it out pressing it before putting it on the rear differential itself, because that means that we can clean it up. All right, so we'll take our rag and just get rid of the RTV that seeped out. Now we're not going to have this luxury again, so we're going to want to go further out on this piece in order to prevent that from going on the inside. If it leaks out a little on the outside, it's not really a big deal, but it's imperative that the inside doesn't have RTV. And it does look a little messy at the moment, but it'll be totally clean by the time we finish. So it's not a big deal. Luckily, RTV doesn't set right away. So if you do happen to do this, don't freak out. It's easy to wipe off. Although if you do happen to use RTV a lot, then you'll know that by the time you're ready to use it again, it's probably garbage and needs to be repurchased. So, you know, it does set. Just know that you do have some time, so it's not going to really cause an issue up front. All right, I don't see any RTV on the edge of that anymore, so we're good there. So now we'll do the same steps on the outside. All right, And again, the gasket is what's actually going to seal it. The RTV is basically just there to ensure that there's no leaks. And as an added bonus, it kind of holds the gasket in place while you're trying to bolt it together. Now, if you've never done this before, I'm sure you're wondering, why did I do it on the bolt side towards the pan and not on the outside? A lot of people have seen it done on all the way around. That's not necessary. Remember, all you're trying to do is keep the axle grease right here. It's not going to go in this area as long as it's sealed there. So that's a bit redundant. You can still do it. It's not going to harm anything, but it's not necessary. And honestly, like I said, this stuff, unless you're using it all the time, is going to dry up and turn into rubber before you get a chance to use it again. So if you feel like you should do it anyway, go ahead, because honestly, you're going to throw away the rest of it anyway. So it's really not a big deal if you do it, but if you don't do it, you're not going to cause any issues. All right, we're under the truck, ready to install. Now, before you put it on, it's important to remember that you get one shot or else you got to redo the whole RTV. So if you're worried that you're going to put it on backwards, there's a couple things to look at. First, if you look inside there, you can see that there's a bolt and it's roughly 70% of the way down. Now, it is going to be lower because it doesn't fill up very full. Secondly, you see that groove right there keeps in tandem with that bearing right there, or that gear. So what you want to do, sorry about the sideways angle, is you want to make sure that one, this is facing in the proper position, and two, that is going to line up right there. And as long as you've done that, everything should be fine. So let's go ahead and install this. Now, one thing before we do, in this particular truck and in pretty much every application, if you look up towards the top, there are these lines. Now there's dirt on the lines, and you want to make sure that those, while they are pulled back, you want to have somebody else helping you if possible in order to prevent dirt from getting inside of your rear differential. Now, if you don't have somebody, that's fine, but it makes it a lot easier. So with that, we'll go ahead and start installing. Alright, now that's every bolt in hand tight. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be using the 13mm again, except instead of a wrench we're going to be using a ratchet just for ease. And we're going to want to do this in a cross pattern. The reason you do that is because if you were to do this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, it takes and pinches the metal and can cause high pressure spots that can cause a leak. If you do it in a star pattern, that makes it so that you don't have the same pinch points, or any at all if you do it exactly right, and that's going to help prevent leaks. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now what I'm going to do, just to make double sure there are no pinch points on this, is I'm going to snug it up in that pattern, and then I'm going to go through and do it again to get them tight. That's going to double ensure that I get rid of any pinch points. So it's just barely tight with the wrench, and then you continue on around and then do it again. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to be using Royal Purple 7590 just because I happen to use Royal Purple. Now, if you use your own, that's fine, but please make sure whatever you use it's synthetic. Synthetic is so much better for pretty much everything in your vehicle operation. Royal Purple does make a really good oil for your rear diff, but if you happen to prefer something else, go with the synthetic version of that. You won't regret using synthetic. Now the rear diff is finally full. And in this case it took about 3.5 quarts. Now a lot of them take less than that. I think my last truck took 2.5. Maybe it took 3. But it can get expensive, especially if you use really good oils. Like the Royal Purple I'm using was like $15 a quart, I think, so that's like $60. And that is a lot. Yes, I get that. But think about it this way. If you're worried about taking care of your rear differential due to cost, please do yourself a favor and do a quick Google search on whatever vehicle you happen to have and look up the cost of a new rear differential for what you're driving, and then make your decision as to whether or not to go with something a little better. Like I said, you do not have to go with what I go with. However, it is in your best interest to go with a full synthetic. And please make sure that if you are running a limited slip differential or electric locker or whatever, make sure that the gear oil that you're using has additives that are compatible with that. One more thing, there are 2 viscosities of the gear oil. Make sure you're using the right one, because a heavier duty oil does sound like a great idea, yes. However, it does build friction faster and it increases temperature, which means that if it's not designed for it, you can overheat your rear differential and take it out. And if you use one that's too thin, you can starve it of oil and take it out. So please figure out what the manufacturer recommends for your particular vehicle as to what viscosity to use. This has been Casey's Garage. Thanks you very much for watching. If you're interested in more how-tos on my Silverado, this is a 2004 2500 HD, let me know in the comments below, and next time it's due for something like that, I will make sure to take care of it. And once again, thank you very much for watching Casey's Garage, and you have a great day.